with me now Dr. Dan Diker. He's president of the Jerusalem Centre for Security and Foreign Affairs. Dan, thank you for joining me today. There's so many media outlets that are just ignoring this story. They're not talking about the diplomatic efforts. They're not talking about the humanitarian crisis in Iran and the people there who are attempting to protest and are being repressed by the horrendous Iranian regime. Can you just bring us up to date on the diplomatic efforts and where things are in your view, Dan?
Absolutely, Peter. Thank you very much for having me on your show. It is indeed true that much of the international media discourse is overlooking the fateful moment that not only the United Kingdom and the rest of Europe faces, but the entire free world, as the Iranian regime continues to play for time in, holding or participating in these diplomatic discussions. But those of us who follow the Iranian regime know that this is a desperate attempt of a regime that has mass murdered tens of thousands of its own people, and that, in fact, we know that they've also assassinated and tried to assassinate many people in the United Kingdom over the last 3 years.
Yes, of course. There have been many people who have, there was a journalist who was stabbed, for example. There have been many attacks on UK soil from the Iranians. I just wonder, from President Trump, he, of course, has had what he called an armada. It wasn't quite an armada, it was a couple of ships in sending them to Iran. It now seems that Iran do seem to want to negotiate with him to some degree. What's your reading of that, Dan?
Well, I think that we have to place the participation of the Iranians and the United States in Muscat, Oman in context. The Iranian regime must be understood for the jihadist strategy of disinformation and deception that they have pursued since 1979, when they captured and held 53 American innocent hostages for 444 days, having murdered hundreds of Americans since the 1970s until this very day. It seems that President Trump clearly is trying to, let's say, unturn all stones, every stone for peace, every effort to pursue some sort of diplomatic path. But let's be very, very clear. The Iranian regime, under the leadership here in these particular negotiations of the Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi, has already said that the conditions the U.S. has laid down for any sort of meaningful advancement on these negotiations have been rejected out of hand by the Iranian regime. We know the regime has already attacked American vessels in the Red Sea. We know as well that the Americans have just in the last hours called for an urgent evacuation of all American citizens and personnel in Iran. That itself is an indication of the path which we are which is currently being pursued as a backdrop to these negotiations. We must never underestimate ever the cunning of the Islamic Republic in its efforts to continue to delay, buy for time. Their strategy, Peter, is to try to get to the American midterm elections in 2026 while completely maintaining their fidelity and their commitment to reaching nuclear supremacy, ballistic supremacy, and the continuation of the support of their terror proxies, which threatens the entire free world. And this is why the chance of some sort of agreement that is an improved version of the 2015 nuclear agreement, what was called the JCPOA, those prospects are very, very low. Yeah. But clearly the United States wants to show, under President Trump, that they have left no stone unturned until they make a decision to really cause or help the Iranian people to change this. You say
no stone unturned, Dan, but I just wonder, when Donald Trump said help is on the way a few weeks ago when it came to those Iranian protesters, we know that thousands of them have been killed since that statement. We know that many people who have attempted to come out in the streets haven't been allowed to do so. We know that there have been murders, there have been executions, there have been many people, live fire has been used. We've seen pictures of Iranian forces running over people, using cars and trucks to run over protesters and kill them or injure them that way. I just wonder if, from the Iranian protesters' perspective, whether they might agree with that statement. They may feel that Donald Trump actually isn't doing enough and there's more that he could do.
This is a very complicated moment. This is a moment of such extraordinary historical consequence that it requires patience. The Israeli people and the American people have already expressed their great support for the brave Iranian people throughout the streets of Iran in more than 150 cities, in 50 or 60 districts across the republic. It is true, as you say, Peter, that the Iranian people are counting on President Trump keeping his word to the Iranian people. And even in the last hours, President Trump has repeated his warnings to the Islamic Republic that if they continue to demand the enrichment of uranium to weapons grade, which they already have, as you know, 400 kilograms of 60% almost military grade uranium, enough to retrofit onto a number of nuclear devices. Unless they cease and desist, they will be forcibly disarmed, and that regime...
And that forcible disarmament is something that I know that many people are calling for, but as someone who is, a citizen of the Middle East, there are many, many people who will say, yes, we can see, we definitely don't want a nuclear-armed Iran. Nobody wants that apart from the Iranians themselves and a few others as well. I certainly don't want it, you certainly don't want it. But there must be a real reticence for people in Israel to call for any kind of action, or at least worry, knowing what military strikes, for example, or what taking away that military capability would actually involve, because Israel is going to be the #1 target.
Well, I think that if you were to ask the friends in the Gulf, the reason that these talks have been moved from Ankara, Turkey, to Muscat, Oman, reflects a profound concern by the Western Alliance's Middle Eastern Arab allies that the first on the target list would not only be Tel Aviv, but it would actually be American bases across 8 countries in the Middle East, as well as the Sunni establishment itself. The Saudis, the Bahrainis, the UAE, Morocco, Jordan, Egypt, all of these countries, Peter, are deeply concerned that they would face Iranian ballistic missile attacks. And let's be very clear, there are thousands of ballistic missiles that are still in the Iranian regime arsenal that weren't completely destroyed in the first round that the United States bombed Fordow with the B-2 bombers, and that Israel did a yeoman's job in controlling Iranian airspace and denuding the Iranians of much of their strategic capabilities. There is still a major threat to the Western Alliance and the free world and the Middle East by the Iranian regime. And this is why, at this particular moment in history, the only reasonable option is to ensure that this deadly I would even say genocidal regime in Tehran is brought to an end.
Dan, really interesting to talk to you. That's Dr. Dan Diker, there, President of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs.